Welcome to the Creative Play and Podcast Network. Join us as we review our favorite RPGs, collectible card games, MMOs, video games, PC games, and bring up interesting topics and things that we'd like to share with everyone. Sit back and enjoy the show.
Hi, this is Kelly, aka Trixie from Ragnarok and Roll, a Scion to Ragnarok story, and Tilda Wimblewick from D&D Journey of the 5th Edition. First off, I would just like to say thank you to everyone for listening to our varied adventures, as well as for rating us on iTunes and RPGpodcast.com. If you haven't rated us yet, we would greatly appreciate it if you could. And if you're looking for more ways to support our efforts, we are now on Patreon, a great site where you can help us continue making more podcasts, as well as some special surprises for our patrons. If you can, please look us up at www.patreon.com/cppn. Every little bit helps. And again, thank you for listening.
Compatriot is missing at the moment, but she should be here anytime, Sarah. It's the Madame Askew way. So, this is the panel for the character creation. Oh, and here she is. Hello.
I was run over and transported and then accosted by midgets with lemons. It's so bad. I'm so sorry. You cannot leave me alone. I need a keeper. I apologize, you darling people. Look, there are chairs.
I know, it's wonderful, right?
I promise I have a present in my bag for you.
Great.
I deserve to give you one, and you have earned it. That made no linguistic sense, but we're going to go with it. Right.
So, I was just starting introductions.
Oh,
And I think that's a perfect way to introduce Madame Askew.
Hello. Oh, my hubris took a hit today. This is the first time I've ever been late before to a panel, so I apologize, darling people. And to you.
I'm not worried about it. I'm sure everyone here is fairly forgiving.
I hope
Right
so.
on.
Well, you are a time traveler, so...
I am, and they're with the midgets with lemons. What can you do? They're impertinent. Please go on.
Well, I was just getting started with describing what we were doing with the panel. You're more verbose than myself, so if you'd like to go a little more into detail.
Well, I'm Madame Askew. As you could tell by my entrance, I'm a bit askew. And today, the delightful Monsieur Hackett, would be Hacker, if we're being French.
You're going to be French about it?
Well, I mean, maybe. Sometimes I like to butcher French. So, Monsieur Hacker and I are going to be discussing, with like sort of a question-answer format, how we create our characters. And, Monsieur, you have made many characters.
Yes.
I just inhabit one most of the time, usually.
So, yes, we're going to go into the overall stages of creating a character from the bottom up and how to implement that at the same time and how to decide ultimately what you want to include with that character and the costume. We're going to start it as a basic Q&A between her and myself, and feel free to raise your hand and interject at any time. We're fairly informal as a whole, so don't feel bad, raising your hand if you have any kind of question, especially if you're trying to develop a costume or a character for yourself. We love talking about this and what we do, and, if you're interested in seeing any of the items or, finding out how anything's built, feel free to ask. We both will be more than happy to answer. So, to start with, where do you personally start when it comes to creating a character?
Well, I'll tell you a little bit about the story of how I became Madame Askew. So we're going to drop for a moment the verisimilitude of me being English, and I'm going to transform to Jocelyn, the person who plays Madame Askew, who is from Oklahoma. And so, actually, what happened was that some friends gave me the name, and with the name came the character. Because how do you fill out somebody who's named Madame Askew? That's not like me at all. She's a very different person. So I had this idea of somebody who was a little bit English, and then she became a lot English, and a little bit fancy because she's a madame, not a miss or a professor or a mad scientist. Well, she's a mad scientist of tea. And then the whole Askew thing came about. So there's always something askew about my costumes, usually my hat. But sometimes it's all of me, like today. So that was kind of like the organic genesis. And then because I improv, and I improv all day, and this is like very unusual for me to break character, then I have developed a whole like backstory that I can pull from at any moment. But it's sort of loose, because if you have to remember a lot of details like a history book, I find that personally, I cannot keep track of when Napoleon had his first brunch date with Josephine. So if I can't remember Napoleon's, how am I going to remember my schedule from like 200 years ago? So I just run with a general outline.
And when you start with that outline for your Madame Askew in particular,
Yes.
what was the first characteristic that you really remember being your signature? Because when I first met you about 4 years ago,
That's right.
then the first thing was that most of us know you by was your laugh.
Not that one. There's a different one.
Yeah. It's more of a high pitched shriek giggle.
We call it the titter.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good one.
Well, that's natural. Like, I've had that laugh since I was wee, and when I was wee, and I would laugh like that, people would be horrified, and I actually got teased terribly. And I remember being at one event as a 20-something when I was working, also performing. Something struck me really funny, and I started laughing. And another booth actually came over and beat on me with buffer swords to make me stop, which was terrible.
That's terrible. It's hysterical, but terrible.
It is, right? I mean, they're trying to make me stop, but they're beating me with buffers. It didn't work. I just kept laughing. So the thing is, the laugh comes naturally, and a lot of what Madame Askew is comes from me, Jocelyn, and it's sort of like characteristics I'm comfortable with. Like, I'm an extrovert, so it's all right for me to play an extrovert. It's a little bit hard for me to play an introvert because I literally want to talk to everyone, but I can. But if I were an introvert, I might find it more challenging to be this exuberantly like, hello, how are you? It's really nice to meet you. I've actually been noticing you this whole time, and I really like your glasses. Right? So that might be a bit much. So I pull from some characteristics of myself that I like, and then I have exaggerated them. But the laugh is like, it's organic. So there was that, but there was also tea. So just perchance, I discovered tea dueling. And then it was like, Katie shut the door. No, wait, that's not the idiom. Katie bar the door? How do you say it in English? Sometimes that's confusing.
I have no idea.
All right,
I'm not familiar with that one.
Oh, dear. Well,
It's bizarre.
thank you! You are lovely and delightful.
So the
Yes.
tea with your character is
Yes.
your most synonymous factor.
It's critical, in fact.
And I've partaken in several of your tea duels.
Right. Now, but what
They're
about...
riotous.
Oh, thank you. But what about you, Justin? Because you do a number of characters.
Yes.
And his builds are beautiful and elaborate. I mean, I remember the first time I met you. First of all, you were really nice, which I appreciate. Really friendly. And you're like from the northeastern part of
Philadelphia, yeah.
Right. I'm like, oh, he's not from here. Neither am I. But, so we bonded a little bit. But you were just starting to make costumes, and I thought it was amazing. You
Yeah.
had all these ideas.
Most of my start in costuming was originally through comic books and superheroes and all of that. And living in Philadelphia and on the East Coast, there really isn't, or at that time, there was not a costuming culture. It was still very much a nerd thing where, side fringe people went. And like one of my first costumes was Cloud. like Final Fantasy VII, and it was one of those types of things, and then of course like the Joker, because who eventually doesn't do that, but I'm an introvert for the most part, and for me, if you haven't noticed, majority of this is masks, and that helps me in costume personally to feel a comfortable level of detachment from my surroundings at the same time, because I have those kind of issues, and most of the characters that I portray in that sense, they also exude those characteristics, where they're more standoffish, cold. For instance, the dragon skull is actually a new creation for the samurai that I have put together that's been evolving over the last 3.5 years, and that armor itself is a good 3 years old now, which is surprising for foam to actually last that long most of the time, because usually people will have destroyed it. Foam, especially in Arizona, is terrible for your cars. Yes.
I just had a quick question. Because you've got masks and you're talking about how that helps you as an introvert. Are they also more inhuman, or is it just the mask?
For the most part, they are all masked, except for the lava monster. That was made for Halloween, so I could scare kids in the neighborhood. When they came to the door, it has a whole big arm and everything, and it was just I wanted that to be what they saw when I opened the door, was just this arm and lava monster. So I actually want to build the rest of that one and have a full lava monster suit. But that one's actually a couple of years old too, and it's a little bit falling apart. But again, that goes in the costume itself, the actual construction and the materials used. That was still early on in my costuming, so I didn't know the right types of glues. So some of them have detached over time, and now knowing what I know and what types of things to use, it doesn't happen as often. But with the Arizona sun, in some ways, pardon my French, you're screwed, because if you stand out there, it doesn't matter what kind of glue you use, it's going to deform, it's going to separate, it's going to crack, and because that's what foam does, sadly. But thankfully, you can move around the entire convention center without going outside now. It's West Building and Main Building. But they definitely, in a sense, are inhuman, because they are related to some other type of otherworldly aspect. Like the dragon skull in itself is, of course, just associated with that type of folklore and mythology. The rhino helmet is actually part of a suit of armor. It was meant to be the Spider-Man's rhino, just done as a full medieval armor that has a big back piece and everything. But again, it was one of those early on in costuming, and the suit was not constructed well enough, and the pieces that I had used ultimately ripped after, a good 3 wearings. So it's one of those, again, for the costume building aspect, yeah, you learn and live. When it comes to it, you just wear it to the con, see what happens. Only thing I'll ever advise against is hot glue.
Oh.
Don't ever use hot glue, because this sun, it's worthless.
You might as well use spit, really.
Yeah.
It'll last longer.
Yeah,
probably.
Elmer's. You might be better off with.
Elmer's lasts longer than hot glue here, because the hot glue just melts again and it laughs at you mockingly. I sew. Everything of mine is stitched, which is very handy because thread does not melt, but it does catch on fire, which could be problematic this weekend.
Spontaneous combustion.
I feel a little bit like that could happen.
That is horrible.
Just give it a second and it's like a battery, she'll wear herself out. So, outside of that, for me, creating the character like that, for this instance, the Dragon Skull goes with the samurai. The character's name is Kame-sen, and basically the idea is that he is a disgraced warrior, and in order to bring him back from that disgrace, he has set out to destroy all of the dragons. So it's not, in her sense, she portrays the characters more. Mine is more just the creation of the story to help fill in what I'm wearing. And that's okay. The big aspect of steampunk is the flexibility. is you don't have to necessarily be in character at the same time if you're an introvert like myself. Like, you just more portray a physical embodiment of a character, and you get directly into the character because you utilize that for your improv, the tea, and things like that.
But the story is important for deciding what I wear. So that even if I'm going on a safari, it has to be a fabulous safari. Probably with an entire service for 12 for tea, somehow transported, possibly by midgets with lemons. I'm not losing that one.
Pull a Fitzgerald.
Oh, right. But everything I wear has to make sense with who I am. So, like, I can do this. So I've got my teacup utility belt, because you never know. And let me tell you, if you are ordering a cup of tea here, they're bringing you wretched Lipton in a little cup of hot water, and they're cheeky enough to call it tea. So it's really better to have your own utility belt with cup. And then I can also, because I use my hands a lot, and I have my friend, I have my pouch of doom, which has things in it which we don't need to know.
Yes, they are. You think that's going to lessen your chance of hitting it?
No.
By moving closer to your head?
All right, maybe we should just and I'll do this. And then I'll knock over the chair. But everything makes sense. It's fancy and bold. Red. So I only wear bright colours, so now.
Well, compliments.
Thank you. I mean, my first costume was brown because I was new to steampunk. And also in my, out of this... All right, in my out of this life, I like brown. And I told myself, because my background is linguistic anthropology, I was like, I'll be like a linguist in the steampunk world, and I'll go interesting places, and I'll have bits of my interesting travels, like this Moroccan vest, and these Turkish trousers, and this Bulgarian vest, and I was all like, I'm from Eastern Europe, and it was great, and everybody was like, look, it's brown. No one was like, are those arabesques hands couched onto your corset? Did you take 12 hours to embroider gold bullion to your costume? No one asked me that. They were just like, oh, it's brown. So now I wear red.
That is a very big trope when it comes to steampunk. It's the goths who discovered brown. And I really believe against that. I love delving into all aspects of the type of world that you exist in steampunk. So, I mean, there's the retro-futuristic and the alternative post-apocalyptic future, or one and the same, depending on how you look at it. So, the idea is that there are other parts of the world outside of the Old West, the East Coast, 1800s, and Victorian England. And I encourage anybody to explore all of those areas, but that does bring in a level of cultural sensitivity at the same time, is you never want to stereotype a costume by using what you perceive as being cultural and appropriate for the time period, as opposed to doing the research to determine that at the same time. Especially when it comes to accents, if you don't.
Unless you're me and you intend to be terrible.
Well, I mean like a cultural stereotype accent.
Oh, no.
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 Just, you get the inkling of, turning around and turning a lure sound, don't do it.
I'll find you. But no, that's an important point, because I like to point out to people two things. One, it turns out the 19th century happened all over the planet and the universe at the same time. It wasn't like there was a bubble of 19th century in London and it stopped there and it didn't make it anywhere else. So we really can pull from all sorts of places, and you do it beautifully, Justin. I've watched this evolve, and it's wonderful. But also, I try not to be lazy, and I encourage other people not to be lazy. And just relying on the stereotypes is not going to give you a great story in your costume. You're not going to stand out from the crowd you'll probably hurt someone's feelings. We don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, not like intentionally, because everyone I meet in this community, and I mean not steampunk, but like the big geek community, we're actually really nice people.
Yes.
And, we might have a cranky day. I have cranky days. But I still don't want to actually hurt someone's feelings. So, like, if somebody comes up to you and says, oh my gosh, like, my grandmother used to wear that. Where did you find it? And you have a story and an answer and information, they're going to be touched. If you're like, I went to Toys R Us and I glued gears on it, they're going to be like, really? Plus hot glue and gears. We covered that. Very bad idea.
One thing I really like to stress with the creating a character and a costume is to find your own voice in it and your own originality. It's really easy to default to certain things because they're very prevalent and easy to find and easy to access. And not to say that they can't be utilized properly. Like this individual over here, since he walked in, I noticed and caught the eye, like his whole, suit.
Yeah.
So it's, there's different ways to embrace your own personal design in it. I really do encourage people to seek out all variations. Everybody wants to be an airship captain, but what about the miners? Like the type of, instrumental pieces that you can create and apparatuses with the idea of what they would be doing. A jackhammer on the back of your arm, or,
right.
some over-exaggerated pickaxe. Or Tiffany, the mechanic with her giant wrench.
Oh, it's delightful.
Yeah.
But, if you are going to be an airship captain, for instance, or anything,
Yes.
I think one of the most critical things you can do is to ask, what more? Why? How? So, I would start with, what kind of airship? Are you a pirate, a smuggler, a privateer, or, a legal business person? Or do you work for the crown and crush all before you? That starts to shape your costume and your character. And in what kind of airship? Is it small? Is it large? Is it fabulous? I mean, it's just keep asking questions until arriving at that thing.
Yes.
And then even if you're wearing brown, which, by the by, I do love brown, but I was very sad when I put 100 hours into a brown corset and no one ever noticed. Literally, I charge $1,000 for it at minimum wage. So if you're wearing an airship captain costume, but your whole story, all of the details are suddenly going to sort of explode visually for people, and they're going to be like, oh, why do you have that beaten up sexton with blood on it? And you can talk about how you used it to fend off the midgets with the lemons on, their tiny ship that was coming for you. And you were like, lemon thieves! I will stab you with my sexton. And then people are like, I don't know who you are, but you're delightful.
So, on the note of, I don't even know where to follow on that one. So, when developing the costume itself, and you do have your character, and you've figured out your backstory.
Right.
What point do you consider too much? What point do you consider physically too much on your costume? Because steampunk is another one of those ones where literally you can just layer on and layer on and layer on more and more pieces and accoutrements and belts, and you can attach 50 pounds of belts, pouches, clothing, guns, and swords. But
right, no,
can you walk around a con for 6 hours wearing all of that? Do you have the endurance to be able to make it through? And if you do, good. I'm glad. I hope you can bend down and pick stuff up without it all tumbling out. I really do, because that's props. If you have managed to make a costume where crap's not falling out all over the place. So, So it's one of those aspects that I really focus on and look at when developing a character as well, and developing the costume of the characters. What things would this person be carrying? legitimately at a given moment in time, outside of course your combat.
Right.
But it's like, what would this person genuinely have all the time? If you feel that your person would have 70 pouches on them at one time, like all over your legs and arms and everything, then great. Maybe he's a merchant that sells stuff on the street, like off the black market.
Or maybe he's a lemon smuggler.
Maybe he's a lemon. Lemon juice?
I would like some lemon juice in my mythical tea. So my benchmarks are, can I walk? Because I have to. So like, I wear very sensible shoes. I tried fabulous
Wearing
shoes.
crappy sneakers at the moment.
Oh, right, no, like I'm missing half a knee. That's not even an option for me anymore. I literally fell off a cliff. That's not improv, that's true. So, and then I'm like, I'm in the desert. It should breathe. So for me, because I'm very active and I make my own things from the skin out, because I'm outdoors and walking and serving hot tea, FYI, not cold tea, hot, in July in Tombstone. I thought I was going to die. And that was delightful because I always tell people, make everything out of natural fibers. It's kind of a good rule of thumb. But I wore a costume lined in canvas in July in Tombstone with tea. I really did think I was going to die. So, people had to sort of shove me into the shade and throw water on me, and it beaded up because I was wearing canvas. It's like, no, this is sailcloth. We don't breathe. So, I try and think about not only the fibers, but the kind of fibers. And then remember, what will I be doing in this fabulous costume? Will I die wearing it?
Do I have a place to carry water?
What is that? Carry water. I have a cup.
I have a sling bag with water and snacks.
I have things in my blue bag of doom over there. But yeah, you have to oh, no, wait, carry things. All right, this is not scandalous. I'm going to, hold on. Ha! All right, so now you can see me, hidden behind the table. I have a hidden bustle pocket.
Yay!
So I can literally smuggle fruit into lemons. But usually apples, or jerky or something, or I'm my cell phone won't fit in my corset because it's huge. I don't know why I did that, but it will fit in my bustle pocket, and you can't tell because it folds under my bustle. So if you make your own costume, you can put pockets everywhere. It's very handy.
And on the other side of that, as a guy who does not wear kilts or dresses, the costumes are often very difficult with carrying things. I mean, as a guy, if you do have pouches and everything, most of the time they don't fit your phone because they have, reversed back to the 80s and gone back to being large bricks. And you can't just carry them necessarily everywhere. And almost everybody has these pouches, and most of people's phones won't fit into these pouches, and at least, without modification. So you always have to have a separate one that carries everything else. Yeah, more or less. I prefer not to call it that, but yeah, that brings back bad 80s memories.
Yeah, right. Look, it's huge. It does not fit here, which is the ladies' secret stash. Well, I guess it does.
The benefit
I lied.
of modifying your own costumes as a guy is that these pants were actually nursing scrubs.
Nursing scrubs.
And I cut them apart and modified them and expanded them to turn into the hakamas. So yeah.
Look at that art. You're hidden back here.
Yeah.
Get out front.
But then, and then because they have pockets, so again, as a guy, I could just flip back that, and I have my phone and everything else shoved in the pockets. But yes, it's all just cut apart and resewn with other pieces of fabric. So it works out really great, and it does feel like wearing a dress because you get a great breeze all the time.
Yes, you have raised your hand so politely a couple times. Oh, dear heavens.
We're taking those away from you.
We need to move that.
People usually don't give me a microphone.
'Cause she doesn't need it.
You were talking about character development and really filling it out. My question, more aimed for you, is where the name comes in. Because I've got a loose character thought process, but the name is a huge part of any character because that defines who you are.
Well, that's actually, what's your name, by the by?
Personally?
Yes.
Patrick.
Patrick, thank you. So that's actually a really grand question because one of my improv partners quipped last night that none of them come up with characters. I assign them names, and then they end up with characters. And I thought about it a minute because I didn't realize I was being so dictatorial. So I'm like kind of too flaky to be a dictator. But I realized that was true, that I would just like spontaneously give my performing partners names on stage when they had no say about it. And they'd have to roll with it. I just announced them randomly. I'd be like, and this is Captain Sexy Pants. And then he walks out and he's like, I guess I'm Captain Sexy Pants now. That actually happened in front of hundreds of people, poor man. So the name though, I mean, if you feel you can inhabit it, and especially if you've picked it yourself, I think it's a focal point. And it's like, you could do literally anything and be from anywhere. You could be a steampunk Klingon who time travels between dimensions. In steampunk, that's totally cricket. And people would be like, right on, like the gear on your, like, Klingon warship, nice. That batleth with Tesla power, very handy. And so, having a name, though, like, helps you refine, like, am I a Klingon time-traveling, Tesla-powered batleth wielder named Jean-Pierre? Like, that says something about your Klingon. I would definitely go out on a date with that Klingon. Doesn't he sound charming, Jean-Pierre, the Tesla-powered wielding batleth Klingon? Anyway, so I use the name as a focal point, and that helps me color in, like, some fantastical detail that brings it to life, you know? And I usually start with the name. Yeah. And maybe a vague concept, like, I'm an adventurer, and my name is X. And then between those two things, I fill in an outline.
How do you go about developing a name? Because I'm hung up on that.
I work the opposite way, is that I develop the actual character and the base of the character, and then try to figure out a name afterward. And the issue that I've always come up with that is because it brings up certain questions, like where is that person derived from? Like what is their cultural background? What is the influence of, you know, what it is that they're doing? Is it a nickname? Like, is it something that they're hiding behind? Because it was what the hell was his name? I did a random character that was like a pompous, like aristocratic prick, and he was Phineas Maplethorne the Third. It's a pleasure to meet you. And yes, and he was just a pompous prick, and it was this idea of this guy who was, you know, just so above everyone that he was like to everything, like you said. Yes, quite indeed, indubitably. And sometimes it does come like that, where it's this idea of this thing, and you put a name together because of the names that existed at that time from different backgrounds. So, but then the third, and then I had a whole bunch. It was like Esquire, MD, like
right. You just have to keep adding them.
Yeah, and you just keep going with a character like that. But so when coming up with a character basis first, and then building from that point, I find that looking at where they're from, what type of background, what led them to that point, because then you can at least come up with a nickname for the character first. Like one of the old Western ones I had was Deadeye Thompson, and it was because I had an eye patch. It was like Deadeye, boom, like problem solved. And it was like Thompson because that was another common name at the time. So I was like, all right, easy enough. And then like eventually filled out the rest of the name built on that, and And I gave him the first name of Jedediah just to be a dick.
I like
Pardon my French.
Jedediah. No, Jedediah Thompson. Dick. Wait, never mind. I was about to go into my 18 plus improv. I'm very sorry.
But I would say just if you have the type of problem like that with developing a name behind a character, look at what she had said before, which was the aspects of the character. You know, what makes them this character, what part are they built upon, and like what is their job, like in all aspects of that, and that can help to pull that together. I definitely recommend looking up names for the time period, especially through different cultures, because if you do have a different type of background, then you can find, you know, the existing types of names for that time period.
You can look for census data, which is actually something I love to do, and now a lot of census data is on the internet, which is very handy. I also pull somewhat from literature. And then because I am actually, I did study linguistic anthropology, then sometimes I just pull from raw knowledge of the culture because I studied the language and I had friends. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to be Dilek from Ankara. That will be very charming, you know. And so, but I just know that because I know somebody named Dilek and I know about Ankara. And everybody's from Istanbul, so why not go post Ataturk and be from the new capital? So, like, I just do some research like that, either out of my imagination. And like Madame Askew, I did not come up with that name. It was given to me, and it's been like the best gift friends ever gave me. The friend who gave it to me is sitting in the front row. But like, I just showed up to an event because I run the events in Tucson for the Tucson Steampunk Society. And I was running around like this. When do we have to do this? And I'm running late, and here's this thing, and oh, you should, well, who are you? And why are we here? And they're like, sit down. And like my hair was everywhere, my hat was like falling off, and my costume was like inside out.
You were all askew.
I was askew.
My sister and I said, that's what we're going to call you, Madame Askew.
Right, and at first I was like, what do I do with this? And then, now you see what I do with it. But you could go, like, both ways a little bit at the same time. Like, have your concept, do a little research, and the name comes to you and it fleshes things out. Start with a name, which is what I do to my poor performers with me. Like, they come in, they think they're going to heat tea water and serve cups of tea. And then they get on the stage and I'm like, hello, you have a new name. And they're like, why did I sign up for this? Are there enough biscuits in the world? I don't know.
Enough tea in China?
That's a good question. Well, it depends on which, version of the Opium War we're on.
You can Google frequent male names from different country, different decade. You could go like a frequent male names in France, 1920s or 1850s. There is also a name generator somewhere on the internet that you can find and you can have fun with, like just generating and say, oh no, this won't work, and then find one. Oh, this one will be good.
And you can, like the name generators, I like to sometimes keep one part and throw out the terrible part. Like, what? No.
Or if you find one of those god-awful Facebook memes where it gives you the thing, just read through all the names. Be like, I like that one. Like, all right. There's another aspect to costuming as well when it comes in is the steampunk community is very accepting basically of anybody and everybody that wants to get involved. You meet almost anybody, they're willing to talk about what it is that they built and how they built it and the ways to build it because they love that type of culture. And at the same time, we also embrace the general idea of the cross-dressing as well. We have so many men that love their Victorian attire and they love the corsets and love wearing the the full bustles and gowns. And I'm envious because I couldn't do a corset. Tried once. That was a no.
Was it custom made for you?
No, it wasn't. Of course not.
Just
I'm not going to pay the money
Monsieur
for that.
Hacker, I'm sure we could work a deal. I
I'm
take
not wearing a
trade. I always need
I like my poor
flying.
posture. No,
you know
posture.
What? You don't have poor posture.
I'm slouching right now.
Yeah, but I mean, you're not, look, you're not doing this. That's hard to do in a corset, actually.
Yeah, see, that's why I like my poor posture.
You're fine, but you could look so sassy with one of those, like, Japanese band. Like, ooh, Margie is Japanese. We could, like, sew you up. You want one. I know it's
Only if it matches my costume.
Oh, we can make it happen.
But yeah, basically anything that you want to dress as or make, we definitely encourage it. And you find anybody to ask, by all means, ask away. We have pamphlets outside that list all of our programming for the weekend, as well as all of the information for the Arizona Steampunk groups. So depending on where you are, there might be a group that's already near you established that you can work with, or that can help you out with building a costume, or with leather working if you don't know how to do that on your own, or anything like that. There's guys all over the place that you can find to assist you with the building of a costume.
Well, a lot of us are on the interwebs, and we meet in between our events there, and we share our projects, and we share new character ideas, which is very pertinent to this panel. And then people are like, oh, great idea. Did you think about X? And you're like, no, I had no idea they had gunships in Tahiti at that time in history. Who knew? Mind blown. More tea. And then, like, you've got this whole aspect to your character that you might not have known about that area of research. So asking people, when I'm doing any sort of character work for a character that is not a culture I'm really familiar with, I like to ask people from that culture. And then I like to be like, so this thing I'm thinking of doing, is it crazy pants or is it like charming? And, then they tell me. You can imagine what the answer is pretty frequently.
Well, that does actually bring up a separate question that I had for you, was regarding personality matching profession.
Oh, right.
Because you're an airship captain, does that mean that you need to be loud and bombastic and overly exaggerated?
Do you remember Robert De Niro from Stardust?
Oh,
yes. Who's read the book? Anyone read the book? The book is very charming. You read the book. Was that a hand up? Right, so the book is very charming. The character is wildly different in the book. And Robert De Niro, took that character in such a marvelous direction in the film. And, it's probably one of my favorite roles he's ever done. And even though I'm like, oh, I'm geeky, I like to read a lot, I love that adaptation, largely because of what he did. And here he is, he's an airship captain, and he's definitely not bombastic. He really puts it on its ear. Now, I'm not saying you need to put on a corset and wear a pink tutu and run with it on your good ship Lollipop of the Skyways.
But if you want to, you can go ahead.
You can totally do it, and I'll make you a corset, because that's what I do. I'm not trying to really put everyone in corsets, but I kind of am.
So, with those characters, when taking into account their personality with the costume, that can hugely influence it as well. Because just because you are an airship captain doesn't necessarily mean that you need to look as lovely as yourself in bright red.
Right.
You can still use your browns and blacks and grays and everything in between. I love patterned shirts, like the crazy patterned shirts, because at that time period, having a patterned shirt like that meant that you had money. Because you otherwise got a plain white or a plain gray or a plain colored dyed shirt. To actually have a patterned shirt meant that you had some form of money. But because all of my characters are scoundrels, it means that I stole it from somebody. And that's the idea behind it, is that, it's obvious I should not be wearing that at all. So, and then it's the only nice thing on the outfit is I have a dingy vest and dingy pants, but the shirt's pristine and clean and pressed and nice. And it's that one type of item. I'll be wearing it on Sunday with this purple shirt, and it's a hell of a purple. And it really sticks out compared to the rest of the costume. And the idea into that is because that particular character very much is that way. The character for Sunday is actually a bank robber version of the Joker, and it's a full like bag mask and everything like that. But of course, the purple is the thing that you want to stick out and draw the attention. But
I think I've seen that costume before, haven't
it's
I?
past
Yes.
Wild West Con.
It's delightful. So, but I think that is important because you've got a name, you've got some details, you're starting to flesh it out a bit. But how is this character in interactions? And even if you don't improv, right, and you're like, whatever, I'm like here to punch leather and look fabulous. I don't need to talk, which is totally cool.
Yeah.
I'm going to be like, oh, look, he looks so fabulous in leather, and he punched it himself. Oh, my God. Oh, you wanted to talk? I mean, I was talking. So it's like, it's okay, right? You can inhabit the character without performing the character by, telling the story with your costume, just as Justin is talking about with the details. And so I think figuring out the personality aspects is important, and having not just one quality of personality. You don't want to just be like, he's surly, she's a coquette. Like, all right, but what kind of surly train robbing lemon wielder is this person? Right? Cheeky surly? Is it Mal Reynolds surly?
I love the strong silent. Don't just stand there, look pretty in the costume, get picture taken, keep moving on.
Yeah, well,
You only answer a question about a name if you must.
Right. You can always squint at people.
Yeah, because the best thing is, especially through there, nobody ever sees your expression. So you can be making the goofiest faces at somebody, but you just keep the eyes focused like that, and then no one ever knows. It's your own personal heaven.
I have this friend who is a professional actor, and he mostly does amusements, as a stunt man and swashbuckling hero in stage productions at theme parks. And but he does some film work too, and he's really he's very garrulous in person, but when he acts, he always says, "I say less," because then I have to let my body language speak for me, and then there's some mystery, so people fill in. Apparently, Madame Askew has no mystery. But that is a really.
But that's the objective behind your character.
Right, I know. Actually, obfuscation. Maybe there is a big mystery, but there's also a big bustle.
So the next thing is the accessories or weapons, for that matter.
Oh, right.
In my development through Steampunk, I personally have never actually had a literal steampunk weapon. I have a replica 1867 Army Colt, and that's it. That's my gun, because I don't necessarily feel that you have to have a giant elaborate weapon to be in the steampunk world. If you want an elaborate weapon, by all means make it. But at the same time, you don't have to feel like an obligation for everything to be over exaggerated and super elaborate. Because of the samurai, I got a big sword. Why not? You go with the anime style and go with an overly large sword.
He kind of fits with your samurai.
Yes, he does.
Put him here.
Separate area, but yes.
He's gonna just be yo, chillin', like a villain.
And that poor guy lost his arm.
I know, in the Teen Wars.
But the idea of your weapons also complementing your character themselves. What would your personality of character actually have as a weapon? If you are a more meek individual, would you have your BFG and you have your nice huge gun because that's your way of compensating that as the character, because you're not so extroverted that your big gun does your speaking for you? Or are you 2 little derringers or 50 little derringers scattered about? So definitely take those things into consideration, depending again on what your character is, because you may not have a weapon at all.
Right, my weapon is my teacup, plus the most dangerous weapon at this convention, Godzilla. Have you seen what he did to Tokyo? So, I don't know why they haven't peace bonded him yet, yeah. But I don't usually carry a weapon either. The only weapons I have were made for me by a friend, and I use them when I'm playing the scoundrel version of Madame Askew, which is her dark side, when she's actually gone out into the fields and acquired her own tea on her airship. Totally legal, really. No explosions usually. So that's when I carry the guns, and like the whole costume is more like a little bit more rough, and the corset is like more military, and I wear like a more, masculine kind of hat. And I used to put like some smudges on my face to make it look like I had some coal on my face, but there was a terrible incident where people took me aside and asked me who my boyfriend was. I was like, thank you for your concern. I will never do this makeup again. See? It comes right off, and they were like, it's so convincing. I'm like, coal dust! It's not that convincing. I looked like I was rubbing my face. What movies are you watching? Anyway, so, but see, that's the thing where I've got this character and I can fit different roles, but I just keep sort of my personality traits, but I think about how would she be in this situation, right? Like, if Madame Askew was smuggling tea out of Beijing over the Himalayas, don't ask me how the geography works, it does in my head. And, I mean, I'm on an airship, everything goes. Would she literally drop green tea teapot bombs? Yes, she would! That's why I have a teapot bomb that I occasionally carry in parades, but not in places like this.
No.
Because I need my hands, and also something that looks like it's got wires running into it with a clock is not very cricket in a large crowd, which is something to consider.
Absolutely.
Do not freak out, people. I think it's like...
when it comes to weapons as well, a certain level of realism is expected, but definitely avoid anything, on the safety side. And then also size-wise, we had a guy at Wild Wild West Con like 3 years ago with an 8-foot-long sniper rifle. And he went, and it was straight up like slapstick comedy scene, because he goes to walk in the door and the gun hits both sides and he springs back and falls flat on his back on the ground. And it was like, well, that's what happens when you have an 8-foot-long gun. So definitely keep certain levels of practicality like in mind with your weapons, because your gun may look cool, but again, you're gonna have to carry that around. If it weighs 35 pounds, after a while you're gonna just be walking like this, trying to drag it everywhere.
Well, and it's with an 8-foot gun, which is like fabulous, and
it was awesome. Don't get me
makes
wrong.
a great statement, and maybe like the perfect, accessory for your character. Remember, even if it's 10 pounds, that's distributed over 8 feet. Which, unless you balance it really well, is going to be tedious to carry. So, for instance, I have all of these accessories in my brain that would be impossible for me to actually bring with me to a convention or to most events. I cannot bring my entire airship crew and the Wedgwood for 12 with my butler, Mick McTavisham, to, serve tea. I can't do it. It's not possible. First of all, the butler doesn't exist, except in my head. He's fabulous. And it's really hard to transport Wedgwood in and out of a convention floor. They want to go through every piece. And I don't want to do that to the poor people at the front gate. Plus, can you imagine the cart I would need to pull a service for 12? I've served tea to actually 8 people, an attorney, and it takes me a huge cart just to do that, so...
So I guess we have about 10 minutes left.
Oh, good.
Is there any questions that anybody has about a character that they're developing, a costume that they're putting together, or general construction questions?
I admittedly got here a little bit late, but I heard most of it. But I've been interested in steampunk for a while. I love making characters. I'm a novelist, so characterization is something I'm very familiar with. But because steampunk just covers so many different things, I'm having trouble figuring out where to start. Just maybe even a time period or a occupation or something like that. Just trying to figure out some starting point.
It is a daunting task, especially when you're just starting out. Because once you've made your first costume, then everything starts flooding. It's like, I'm making all the things. And it gets to a point where it's like, okay, I got to reprioritize.
I reprioritized and got rid of my mundane clothes.
Yes.
More costume space.
Most of my closet is costumes now. But so I understand, and we did actually cover that at the very, very beginning. But when it comes to creating the costume, I guess part of it is deciding ultimately where you want to start. It's like, what is the base, the core of your character? Are they an orphan that grew up on the streets, in New York City in 1864, or are they growing up in the desert in 1864? Because that's going to influence the type of character. And then I guess from that you can start to develop their career, like what they've gone into, what's their overall profession, how badass are they, or how, ladylike that you can be. Or masculine for that matter, like however which direction you want to take it. I would recommend kind of building from that. Like start from what is the core of this character, what is the feeling, I guess, behind this individual that draws you to it.
I would say, think about what you actually like regularly and what you're comfortable with regularly. I would not have been comfortable making a miner who had a fascination with ferrous minerals. A, I have claustrophobia. B, I hate being dirty. Really, I have an issue. There's dust on my hand, I'm going to melt. So, those are just hang-ups I have personally. So it'd be terrible. I'd have to be like the OCD miner. Now, I do have OCD, so that'd be easy for me. I'd be like, my pickaxe is very shiny. No, I do not go into your mine. I'm the pickaxe inspector. Could roll with it. But you could also just join my improv troupe, and apparently I assign people characters just left and right, like some sort of crazy name-dropping junkie. I don't even know.
I wouldn't quite go there.
I can stop drinking tea anytime I want.
Did that help even a smidge?
A little bit.
Okay. Well, is there anything further than that you're looking for in regards to it? Like, are you having just a general creator's block, where it's like I can't figure out one section to work on? Because if that's the case, go with all of them. Think about all of them at once. Like, they're an archaeologist doctor from Istanbul that has traveled everywhere in the world and space, and has a spacesuit, a diving bell, and a princess costume. Literally do it. Your character can be anything. So if you want them to be all of those things, then screw it. You're a child genius who developed every cure for everything, and now you're just traveling the world on your money. Off the top of your head, just make something up and go with it. That's how I do half the things, to be entirely honest. It's make up a character and be like, okay, this time samurai. Now what is this samurai going to do? Where is he coming from? What am I, going to make him become? How mean of a person is he if he's stuck traveling alone? How nice of a person is he? Because he had befriended all the animals that he comes across, minus the ones that he kills. I don't know. You can make them nonsensical for that matter, because it's steampunk and you can make it whatever you want. I don't know. I have such a lighthearted sense to steampunk, because from the beginning they've been so embracing to my sort of oddity to the steampunk world, because I've been very opposed to just being a cowboy or just being an airship, captain, because I don't fit into that personally. For myself, I don't see that. So I recommend anybody just embrace all the quirkiness that you have and utilize that into your costumes. Like you said, to bring out the parts of yourself and the things that you already like and assemble them. Plus thrift stores. Thrift stores are your best friend.
Boom.
You can find anything. Half of my costumes are built from stuff that I've stumbled across, like pouches being ooh, belts, shirts, everything. It's thrift stores.
You have thrift store magic. Yeah. I'm cursed with thrift stores, which is why I sew. It's true. That's true facts. So, any other questions before we have to scamper? The lemon thieves are coming, so... I know. much for them. Any other questions?
Yeah, like, again, anything in regards to even costume development, like pieces that you're trying to build, or questions about where to locate items if you're looking for things in particular.
I know this is on a tangent, but to get back to the name question from a really long time ago.
Epiphany.
So Patrick, so there is this book that I love. It was written by Sherilyn Kenyon. I know, the woman who writes like the Bodice Rippers, but she used to write this character naming source book. And it's like, it's not complete. It's not every name in the universe. It doesn't even have Klingons. But it has a lot of cultures. Her scholarship's a bit dodgy. Don't believe everything she says, but if you can find a copy, it's divided by section, by ethnic group, by region, by country. And so if you're like, I want to be an Irish, teapot juggling, circus owning madman, boom! Go to the character naming source book, flip through his Gaelic names, his Irish names. Is he a Gaelic person? Is he a Gaelic speaker? Is he from Northern Ireland or from Scotland, transplanted time traveler speaking Gaelic and Gaelic? I mean, you have like all the options there, right? So it's a very handy source, and I'm sorry I forgot it earlier. Sherilyn Kenyon, character naming source book, super easy, on Amazon.
And then basically outside of that, we've covered everything that we had on hand for our costuming workshop, and that actually works out great with 2 minutes left. If anybody's interested in seeing the masks, by all means, come on up. They are made of EVA foam, so they're not terribly delicate, but at the same time, it's one of those just general gentle handling. But I'm going to be also handling a panel later with John and Sabrina Floyd of Tucson, and if you are not familiar with them, they are the duo of Grit and Grimes, which is a giant rock monster, and the Gentleman Robot. They will be with me discussing helmets and costume building and the things to actually go and build the costumes. So if you are interested in trying to build things from EVA foam or other materials related to steampunk, that will be later today, which again is included in the pamphlets. So I hope you guys have a great day at the con, and thank you for joining us for this first panel. Hopefully we kept you entertained.
Fist bump!
Thank you for listening to the Creative Play and Podcast Network. And feel free to enjoy our other shows, such as D&D Journey of the 5th Edition, and Scion Ragnarok and Roll, a Scion hero to Ragnarok story. Thank you for listening.